Welcome to the Innovation for Students by Students panel at the 2021 Sydney Innovation Festival. My name is Imogen Barwick and I will be your MC for today's session. Today, we have a fantastic panel of Sydney students and alumni who are going to share their expert tips and advice as to how you can get involved in innovation activities at the University of Sydney and how you can get a job at a startup. This is your opportunity to talk to students and graduates who have entrepreneurial and startup experience, so get your questions ready. I would now like to welcome our moderator for today's session, Matilda Langford, a University of Sydney student ambassador who is going to do our Acknowledgement of Country. Thank you, Matilda.
Wawani, Yinige, Yama, Niega, Matilda, Niega Gumbainga Wongan. Hi, I'm Matilda and I'm a Gumbainga woman. I would first off like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we are coming from today. I would like to acknowledge elders past, present, and those emerging. Hello everyone, welcome to the Innovation by Students for Students panel. So we will have the opportunity to have Q&A towards the end of the panel, but feel free to ask any questions along the way and I will get to them then. So first up, the panelists joining me are Adam. Adam is a final year student at the University of Sydney studying economics and arts. He runs the podcast, The Sachin and Adam Show, which interviews leaders, innovators and investors, with guests including Malcolm Turnbull, Elizabeth Broderick and Tim Fung. Through the podcast, he's gained a passion for the startup ecosystem and is also currently building an investment syndicate that allows young people to invest early in startups, which is pretty incredible. Next up, we have Muskan. Muskan is a second year commerce and law student and the current president of Enactus. Since her first year of university, she's been part of Enactus, where she first spent 1 year leading and developing a startup with a team of 5 before moving on to leading a society of over 60 members and doubling the number of active startups, which is pretty incredible. Then we also have Rishabh, Rishabh is a second year biomedical engineering and science student, passionate about medical innovation led by youth. He's currently the president of the Sydney University Society of Medical Innovation and enjoys bringing together students, academics, and industry to inspire the next generation of medical innovators. Then last up on the list, but definitely not least, we have Audrey. Audrey is a recent finance and computer science graduate who has had experience working across startups and venture capital before finding her feet in the product world. She is now an associate manager at Canva, working in the collaboration team. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Hope we're all doing well on this. I think it's a cloudy afternoon here in Sydney. So my first question, I'll go to Rishabh first, is all about the fear of failure. So we all know that the fear of failure is something that can hold a lot of people back from taking the leap to follow their passions. So I would like to know each of your experiences with failure and how you've managed to overcome those fears and setbacks to get to this point that you're at now. Rishabh, over to you.
Matilda, that's such an interesting question. I'm actually really happy that you started with this one. Those intros were amazing. I think we were listening to, each of the amazing things that the panelists have done. And I'm sure that people watching are thinking, wow, look at these people who have had so many successes, who've done so many amazing things. But I think what we forget is that each of us, I can't speak for the other panelists, but I know that I've had so many different failures, which almost make those successes seem like they're nothing in comparison. I think as well, when we think about innovation, when we think about startups, when we think about large companies, we think of those people like the Bill Gates, Ray Dalio, Steve Jobs, Warren Buffett, all these amazing people. And we think about all their amazing successes. But what we really forget is that each of these people have had major failures behind them as well. So Ray Dalio bet on something in 1982 and he went bankrupt then, or he went broke. Bill Gates made a mistake that cost Microsoft $400 billion in terms of the Android versus Microsoft operating systems, all these other things as well. I've never made a mistake that big, but I've definitely made mistakes that I haven't been proud about and I've been really ashamed about. And that have kind of stopped me in some ways, from wanting to explore further. One of the biggest ones is actually in year 11 and year 12. I go to this because this is something that was really, really big for me back then. But I was the president of the environmental group at our school, and schools are terrible in terms of waste management. Schools have huge amounts of landfill, really, really expensive, and I wanted to rethink recycling across Sydney, across schools in Sydney. So I spent many, many months with lots of people. We got lots of money to pretty much rebuild the school's recycling system. And we put a lot of things in place in terms of planning. And we got a lot of support. Over time, we hit a few hurdles now and then. We came across a few failures. And eventually we actually reached a point where it kind of just stopped and I didn't drive it any further. And there were some people who came to me and said, hey, we gave you like $3,000 a few months ago. What's happened to that now? And I just said, I'm so sorry. It hasn't happened. We've stopped. So that was really interesting because it was something that I was really not proud about. It was something that kind of made me say, I never really want to try anything new again. But what I actually found out is about 1 or 2 years after is it was actually that which inspired a lot of the junior members in our team to then take on some really similar initiatives and do some amazing things around the school. It was also that experience which has helped me learn so much more about the environment, about startups, a lot of which I'm directly applying now into one of the units I'm doing, ENGD 3001, absolutely awesome with Ben Lindsay. I think it's really important for us to remember that failures are usually given a bad rep, and we want to really see them as learning opportunities. And for me, I'm looking back now, I realize that it was these things that I did that have probably made me who I am today. Yeah, that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Rishabh. That was incredible. Thank you for putting that into perspective. I feel like a lot of people do forget just how much a failure can become a stepping stone in the rest of their life. Okay, next up, I'm thinking of going to Muskan.
Easy. Well, for me, mine's a little bit different. So back in high school or primary school, I was that kid that was so obsessed with being a doctor. For me, there was no other career path. It was my one and only plan A, no plan B at all. So I had that dream for 9 years and I tried for 2 years to get in, and I poured my blood, sweat and tears literally into that dream. And spoiler alert, I didn't get it. So it was incredibly difficult to kind of go, yeah, Muskan, you're not going to be a doctor and you need to accept it and you need to move on. And at that point, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, what career to do, where I was going to go. I felt like an absolute failure. So I was like, instead of feeling sorry for myself and keep crying, I'm going to take every opportunity that was given to me and take it and run with it. If I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. So some opportunities I didn't get. So I didn't get into business one on my first go. But others I did get, like Enactus, which I still believe till this day was kind of a fluke. Whatever, that's another story for another day. And I genuinely believe till this day, Enactus has kind of changed my life and has led me to become this passionate person that I am about entrepreneurship. And I say this for like 3 reasons of why Enactus changed my life. So number 1, I discovered entrepreneurship and what it entails. I thought entrepreneurship, kind of like what Rishabh touched on, was like Bill Gates and like those were the entrepreneurs of the world, but that's not what it is. I also got to have a go, like Tilly said in the intro, to create my own startup. And obviously it was unsuccessful, but I learned heaps and heaps, and I got to learn such valuable leadership experiences. 2, I got to be inspired by people around me who helped me discover what passion looks like and what I could do with it outside of my studies. And 3, how I can use innovation to solve the social issues I care about, like sanitation, unequal access to education, homelessness. So I guess like the takeaway from my failure was take every opportunity you're going to get and run with it. You'll never know where you'll go. And a year ago, I would have never imagined myself to be here speaking at the Sydney Innovation Festival, or even be the president of Enactus. So that's all.
That is absolutely incredible. I feel like as well, a lot of people forget just how many times people change their like career paths in their lives. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a ballerina. Now I'm in a law degree. So, I never did ballet, but, but these things change along the way. Next up, we'll go to Adam.
Cool. My story of failure really comes from going into university with a lot of ambition, probably a lot of ego and a lot of confidence. But when I got to university, my mind was really scattered in a lot of different places. I wanted to start businesses. I wanted to party. I moved out of home. And I had like lots of hobbies, but I didn't really focus on the fundamental things that you should be doing when you're at uni. Things like getting a decent WAM and things like doing lots of internships. And so I had all these big goals with my life, and I sort of woke up. I was in like second year uni and I had a WAM of 65 and I had no internship experience, but I'd done a bunch of cool things. And at the time I'd done international sort of experiences, like going on exchange to the Netherlands. I went to India with university, did an sort of help build a school, but I just had really no professional qualifications. So I got back from exchange and I was super motivated. I thought I wanted to work for like a social enterprise, do really well with that. And I got some experience and I had a couple of setbacks, and I guess I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. And feeling in a sort of crisis mode, not having a good WAM, not having many internships, I almost dropped out and joined the army as an officer because I thought that my pathway just wasn't going to university and I couldn't make it. And I actually started to join the Reserve Army, and I went through a large part of the process. And so I sort of followed that for a bit. And I was walking down Eastern Avenue one day at uni, and I realized that if I actually do this and I drop out of uni, so many of my initial ambitions I'll never be able to do in life. I won't be able to sort of be on the boards of corporates. I won't be able to work in investments and other sort of strategy and corporate strategy things I thought. And so I actually flipped back and I said to myself, okay, Adam, you've got sort of one opportunity to do this right. You've got to increase your WAM to 75. You've got to do all these internships. You've got to find out what you want to do. And you've got to get a lot of coffees with people to find out what you want. So I basically made this 2 to 3 year plan to improve every sort of professional facet of my life. And I was just relentless. I sort of just tried to do as well as I could with uni. I reached out to everyone for coffees and I just did a bunch of internships. And that actually worked out really well. I sort of achieved everything I wanted to achieve. I found out what I wanted to do. And the thing that I learned from all of that was that you've really got to find out what your why is. And often in moments of crisis or moments of challenge, you really sort of reflect on, why am I doing what I'm doing? Where do I want to be? And if you have a strong why, that can really will you and take you to places and sort of drive you to the sort of heights of where you need to go. And yeah, I was able to sort of follow this structure, this program, and I guess get to where I wanted to be.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, next up we have Audrey.
Awesome. I really love listening to all your stories. I think like a really common underlying thread between all of us is that we've definitely experienced like some difficult setbacks throughout our careers, throughout our uni lives. And I think like one big thing that every university student goes through at some point is dealing with rejection. And I can definitely talk through that. You know, when we go in these panels or when you go into interviews, you really only talk about all the highlights of your experiences, when in reality, to even get to that interview, like we probably already got rejected like 30 times trying to actually get into that opportunity to begin with. For me, I think a very relatable experience for everyone is like first year, you know, you're really trying to get into all the different societies, you're interviewing for subcoms, and some are definitely like extremely competitive. And I know like I didn't get accepted into one of the societies that I tried extremely hard to interview for, made it to the last round, didn't get in, and was like in tears for that day. And I kind of look back at that as like in hindsight, that it's a very hilarious and funny experience. But obviously in first year, getting into the society that you want is really, it really does mean the world to you. But yeah, and I think what that does is that actually builds resilience, and it makes you actually try harder and realize like, hey, you know, maybe I didn't get my plan A, but I never really thought about like what my life could look like with a plan B and a plan C. So yeah, like maybe I didn't get my top choice, but I then did later join subs in my first year and like moved up the ranks a little bit and really loved that experience. And again, like a couple years later, you know, everyone applies for internships, everyone goes through this like grueling job application process. Didn't get my dream job at the time. I wanted to be a product manager at Atlassian, made it to the last round and got like knocked out by one other person. So I think in moments like that, it really makes you question and go through like every single moment in your interview process, be like, hey, did I say that sentence wrong? Or hey, if I like had reached out 2 days earlier, like maybe I would have got it instead of that person. But I think in hindsight now, when I take a step back, I realize like, hey, me getting rejected from Atlassian made me realize like, oh, I can definitely still reach out to these people to find more internships. Or like, if I really wanted that product management experience, like I can definitely learn it by myself. I can talk to more people. And yeah, I think without having been rejected that first time, I wouldn't be as good of a PM as I am today. So I think all of these like formative experiences of rejection and people telling you that you can't do it, it really helps you build a like muscle for resilience and makes you, you know, stronger and I guess less embarrassed to put yourself out there and ask for things to help steer your career in the right direction.
Absolutely. All of you have had such great pieces of advice, and coming from so many different areas, I feel like it's really inspiring just to see how many different backgrounds can lead to these sort of careers and pathways. So my next question is more about the world of startups. So Adam, the world of startups might seem a bit daunting or confusing to some people. I know it does to me. So I'd like to ask, what sort of degrees or skills are able to lead to a career with a startup?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question because startups can seem like a bit of a rabbit hole for a lot of people. There's so many different types of companies that are sort of disrupting different industries. And you want to know, where do I start? Where do I fit into that ecosystem? And I think the answer is a really good one, that anybody can literally go into startups. No matter what your background is, whether you've gone to uni or you haven't, business student, art, science, you can go into startups. And on my podcast, I've met people with all different range of backgrounds, like Tim Fung, who started Airtasker. He studied tourism and hospitality management. I didn't even know that was a degree. Kirsten Hunter, who started Future Super, she studied history and medicine, like very, very diverse backgrounds. And I think a big reason from that is that at startups, there's different roles for different people. You have technical roles in startups where if you want to work as a developer, you might want to study computer science. If you want to work as a designer, you might want to study design. But there's also non-technical roles in roles like strategy, operations, product, which Audrey was talking about. And really anybody can go into those roles, because a lot of what startups are about isn't about having a specific background or specific degree, but it's really about your mindset inset. It's about being a good problem solver, being analytical, being someone that's very open-minded to different ideas, and being someone that's very independent. So what I'd say to people is that don't worry about your degree too much about startups, but worry about cultivating specific mindsets, in particular that problem solving and that sort of radical open-mindedness. I think those are really much more important than what you study.
It is absolutely fantastic advice. And even if those sorts of skills are really important, even if it's not like, even if it's not just for startups, but definitely across all career paths, being able to cultivate those skills is crucial. Yes, Rishabh.
I think what Adam said is fantastic. I think that's wonderful, and it links into so many things that societies like to do, that societies that are focused on startups and innovation. So I can speak best about the Sydney University Society for Medical Innovation, SUSMI, but SUSMI is all about, I guess, the interdisciplinary nature of innovation. And we love to remember the fact that innovation is about diverse perspectives, talents, and skills, and bringing people together from these areas. I was very lucky with one of our recent events to have the opportunity to kind of like interview a lot of the mentors and judges that we had for our hackathon event. And in that time, I was talking to them about kind of like, who do you look for when you look for a potential startup employee? And some of them said, I'm looking for someone in the neuroscience area who can really help me with this. But really, the underlying thread to a lot of what they said was, well, we're looking for people who have energy, who have passion, and who are dedicated. Don't care where they're from. Typically the ones I pick from this area that I usually think are going to be great may not end up being great because they don't have that energy, that passion that I'm looking for. A great person who I talked to was Dr. Mani Bartase from BCAL Diagnostics. They're looking for amazing ways to change up breast cancer diagnostics and make that process easier, less invasive. And she said, I'm looking for, I don't care what your discipline is, I'm just looking for you if you're ready to help out and if you're ready to make a difference. So I think what Adam says is absolutely crucial. And I want to remind everyone here that don't let your degree hold you back. Instead, look at what has this taught me? What can I bring to the table? I think that's key.
Absolutely fantastic words of advice. Thank you so much. So I'll go on to the next question, and it's one that seems to come up quite a lot. So I'm going to go over to Audrey first for this. What do startups offer that the corporate world does not? And for someone who may be having trouble deciding which direction to go in, what things would you recommend that they consider?
Yeah, this is an awesome question. And when talking to students, I feel like people are always asking this, hey, should I go down the startup route after I graduate, or should I go down big tech? I guess specifically talking through the corporate versus startup atmosphere. I think it really depends. What are you optimizing for at different stages in your life? I think if you are joining a startup, you're really optimizing for the learning angle, because the reality is you might not get paid as much, even though you do get equity in most companies. The work hours are typically pretty long because you're slogging out, since no one else really has you don't really have a huge team to support you on things. So you're really like working across the board. On the corporate side, or like specifically my experience at Canva so far, it is a bigger company. So you have a lot in like the lifestyle category if you're optimizing for it, in that you do learn a ton, but it is very much more like specific to the depth of like what area you're in. For instance, like I learned a ton of best practices from product management here, whereas when I worked at a startup, you kind of just get like pulled into everything all the time. And it's more of a question of like, how well can you execute and how well can you like operationally handle everything at the same time and put out fires, versus like a corporate environment where you do get a lot more support, you do get a lot more like planned social activities, you do get a lot more like people who are mentoring you and telling you like, hey, this is the context of like how you approach a problem at Canva. So yeah, just like a huge difference in terms of like your operating principle when you are employed in these roles. And yeah, I guess more so from the startup perspective, I think it is a epic opportunity no matter what degree you study. Like I myself studied finance and computer science, have never worked in either of those roles specifically at a startup. And I think if you're not exactly sure like what exactly you want to be working in after you graduate, and you just want to explore like different roles and different things that you can do, working at a startup really helps you to, I guess, see like, hey, how do you run a marketing campaign? Like what is product design? How do you do a sales call? All of these things that I learned when I joined an early stage startup, and I definitely wouldn't get that type of exposure at Canva. So yeah, I guess it depends if you know exactly what you want to do and hey, you want to like really upskill and build like the depth in a specific area, by all means, like working at a larger company will really help you build that goal or build that skill. But if you're looking for like breadth and you like the autonomy and you like to work at a much faster pace, the startup side is also good. I also have done both and I love both. And I think at everyone's career, like having the opportunity to like work in a large company, small company, it all really helps.
Yeah, it seems like an absolute breadth of knowledge coming out of those areas. Yes, Adam?
Yeah, I just wanted to add really quickly, something to bolt on to that. At startups, you can also have a different type of impact, whereas if you're at a big corporate. So at a big corporate, let's say a big bank, you often get siloed into a particular division in a particular role, and you don't actually change the fundamental structure of the organization. They're just too big. If you join an early stage startup, especially if you're saying the first sort of 10 people, you can fundamentally change the organization, the product, and the culture. And you can have these really wide scale impacts. So that's another thing to consider about whether, if you're at a big bank, maybe you can control hundreds of millions of dollars, but you don't change the organization. At a startup, you can really be that sort of driving force.
Yes, absolutely. Oh yeah. Yes, Audrey.
Sorry, thanks, Adam. You reminded me of just like some specific things that I just wanted to talk on, I guess, like in my experience on like startup versus big tech. I think, again, adding to that point, as an example, like working at a startup, I've been doing like product design, I really can, from 0 to 1, create the entire inception of like, hey, what do I want our product to look like? That is really up to me. And if I want to redesign it, I can. If I want to talk to users and change like how our app looks in 2 minutes, I also can. Whereas at Canva, obviously this is a much longer process of like, I need to talk to the UX designer to be like, hey, is this even a problem to begin with? And what I could do in a day to change a whole product in a small company would take like 3 to 6 months at Canva. So yeah, I guess the impact aspect is also really important.
Yes, absolutely. That's so important to think about. Thank you so much for that. That was such a really great question. My next really great answer, sorry. My next question I'm actually going to ask Adam. So I know that on your Sachin and Adam show podcast, you have a lot of really important guests come on. So my question was about networking. When it comes to networking, how do you recommend people approach it? And what is it like within an innovation space?
Yeah, that's a really important question because networking is at the heart of so many opportunities. And I just want to say that before the podcast and before I did a bunch of internships, I was a bit scared of reaching out to strangers. Honestly, that was one of my fears because I was scared that people wouldn't respond or they'd think I'm some silly young kid. But it's really easy to get over those sort of fears because through habit and through realizing that other people just don't care that much, like they don't care if you sort of embarrass yourself or anything, then it's fine. So I guess my tips for reaching out to people, obviously LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the golden standard for how you want to meet people if you're in the innovation ecosystem. Now, in terms of how you're actually going to reach out to people on LinkedIn, it really comes down to being genuine and authentic, because sort of in the later stages of universities, a lot of people want to meet people for coffee because they're thinking about internships, they're thinking about other types of jobs. And some people can get a little bit transactional. They sort of just go after people and they say, I want this, but really just be genuine, be yourself, and be quite nice. So when you're sending messages, just show that you're a human being, and be quite direct with your want, but also add in a sort of human element. And I found that that always works. And people are generally very responsive on LinkedIn and just in general, if you send a cold message. So I think that's really important. And then the second thing is that if you want to keep on meeting people, especially if it's for a podcast or trying to sort of network into companies, you can use sort of pre-existing networks to get you to other places. So if I meet sort of Audrey for a coffee one day and she tells me all about Canva and her other jobs, she might recommend me to some of her other friends or some other higher ups at Canva. And then you can sort of follow this trail of people, which gets you to really cool places. And every sort of pretty big podcast guest I've ever had, a lot of those didn't really come from cold reach outs, but they came from someone just happened to know them, and you sort of build rapport and friendship with someone over a coffee. And by the end of that coffee, they're happy to sort of recommend you to anyone. So yeah, I'd say do authentic connections, and then follow the trail of the people that you meet.
Fantastic. Yeah, from my personal experience, I would say that remembering people's names is a really important part of just getting anywhere with what you want to do with your passions, because you might meet someone and then see them like a year later and they've done something really cool. If you remember their name, you've already gotten in with it. So my next question is kind of about networking, but more about the community. So I'll go to Muskan for this one. How important would you say that building a community is within, this is to all of you, but each of your field, but with your field specifically, Muskan? I know you manage a lot of people with Enactus and you're constantly talking to people. So how important do you think is building that community?
100%. So like it is incredibly important to just answer your question directly, but it takes a lot of time and it is quite hard. But I guess like two reasons why it's really important is it helps you be passionate, and two, you get to learn about things. So kind of an example. So one of my friends and I were kind of talking about enacting one of our ideas into a startup. And we were faced with like that same idea that we had was already in the market, the exact same, have we wanted to do it? And it was incredibly like disappointing and sad. We're like, damn it, we can't do anything anymore. So we ended up scrapping it entirely just because it was a competitor. And in this community called Early Work, which is just a community of 800 people that are so passionate about startups, and it's completely free to join, would really recommend joining. They have this thing called coffee chats, where they just like randomly pair you up with someone in those 800 people. So I had a coffee chat with someone and I shared him that exact story that I just shared with all of you. And I told him the idea and he said this, and I quote, he's like, don't be scared of competitors. Improve the competitors' products or find out what they don't do well. Literally use their products and see what gaps or what things don't work in that product. And a lot of the greatest inventions we see today, Google, Facebook, already did exist. They're merely improvements of those like pre-existing products that we don't know of today. And I guess this is like one of the many, many learnings I have learned. And by like building a community, I have learned that. And I guess there's two kind of ways to build that community through Enactus and societies. You already have that pre-existing community. I already have a community of 65 members. And I've built that mainly through recruitment and like enticing people to join. So that's one way. But I think when you're not in a society, a way to personally build your community, and I think Adam's touched on this, is through LinkedIn, through joining platforms like Early Work, which are startup communities. And there's heaps out there. And just reaching out to people and being authentic is exactly what Adam said, was what I'd say. But feel free to add on if anyone has anything else.
I think you must have absolutely nailed it. Thank you so much. That sounds absolutely incredible. I know that we've spoken quite a lot about just how, full on a lot of projects can be and how time consuming. So my next question is to Rishabh. So I understand that in these innovation-based areas, the workload to get things off the ground especially can be quite overwhelming. So I just want to know, how do you maintain a passion for your work?
Yeah, that is huge. I think you're spot on in terms of just how intense some of these things are. I know Muskan has been doing such an amazing job with so many long hours just to manage Enactus and so many other things. And I know Audrey and Adam have been doing just incredible work as well. There are definitely times, like I think I remember Gary Vee and a lot of these other people talking about how entrepreneurship has started to become in some ways something that's um, glorified in some ways, if that makes sense, or glamified, if that's a word, in terms of it, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an innovator, this sounds awesome, and it's something that I really want to do, but you're going to come across so many different times when that gets tested. There's times when everything goes wrong. There's times when people say no. There's times when things fall apart. And what really needs to carry in that time is what Adam said, going back to that why. So going back to why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I want to get my name onto some sort of board somewhere? Am I doing this because I want to get recognition? Or do I actually want to make a difference? Do I want to do something that I'm really passionate about? For me, of course, it's the medical space. It's somewhere where I'm really passionate to make a difference, but also to inspire other people to kind of find their whys as well and find their journeys. On my board at home, in my whiteboard, I kind of have a list of all the people who inspire me, and they're not necessarily the people who have done something amazing, but also people who have some significant challenges they've gone through. One of those people is my grandfather. My grandfather actually had a bit of a slip in India where he hit the back of his neck on the sink basin, and that effectively paralyzed him neck down. Even then, he would, on his bed, he would watch the news, he would do his stocks and shares and things like that, by mouth. He would always talk to us and inspire us and tell us how he's going, and that is incredible. And a few of my students at the work I do have had cancers, but they've gone on, they've pushed on to get incredible results. I think it's remembering that I have an amazing impact on those students' lives, on my grandfather's lives, on all these people's lives, and I can make a difference, and I can really, really affect the lives of other people, which I think is absolutely key. So in those times when things get really difficult, in those times when your will gets tested, I think it's going back and remembering, why did I choose to do this in the first place? Is that something I still believe in? If yes, then keep pushing on.
Wow, that's so inspiring. Oh my gosh, thank you, Rishabh. I'll go on to Muskan.
Yeah, so just kind of adding on really quick to Rishabh, which he summed up pretty much everything that I wanted to add on it anyway. But I think just being patient and taking baby steps. And I guess this is more so advice for me. I am very impatient as a person. I want success to happen overnight, but it doesn't. Like a sporting analogy that I like using is you could keep trying to get like that basketball in the hoop for days, weeks, or even months, and you're going to keep missing and it won't go in, no matter how much you try. But one day it will, and you'll rarely miss. So I think those little tasks that you do, the consistent efforts and the obstacles are there that you have to get through, and it will make you better and it will make a difference. So I just like take that first step. Don't look at the top of the mountain, look at where you are and just look at this next step forward and keep moving. And sometimes it really helps just looking back and to see how far you've come. Like if I back then in my first year was like, I'm going to be the president of Enactus, I would have been like, you're joking. There's no way I can do that. That's so freaking daunting. But then I didn't focus on that. I just focused on, okay, well, what can I do now to improve myself? So I applied for a HR director position, and then I applied for vice president of internal affairs, didn't get it on my first go, but then got it on my second go. And as a first year student, to get a vice president position is quite unheard of at that point. And I was like, okay, let's go on for presidency. It's just taking those little steps will really make a difference and will prepare you for the next role. Don't try to rush through it. Just take your time. But yeah, this is also advice that I need to adopt. So there you go.
Thank you so much. I swear I need everything you've just said written on posters around my house. So thank you so much once again. My next question is kind of about, obviously it's hard to ignore the pandemic and the past 2 years, but in that time we have seen huge changes to the face of innovation. So I'll start off with Audrey. I'd like to know, what do you recommend people do to navigate, especially beginning something during this time? And how do you think it's changed, and how do you think people should be going about it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think we're super lucky actually, just because now technology is at a point where like we're able to get any information that we want on any topic at any time. So I think there's not really a huge excuse for you to like not be able to, learn up about a topic that you're really interested in. If you're really passionate about something, like it's so easy to get content and upskill and be and be able to like learn as much about that thing if you wanted to really like get immersed into it and like create something or a product or a business in that space. We also have like beyond just like the information that's accessible, the tools that you can use to actually like create now is at a level that definitely didn't exist like even 2 years ago when I started uni. For instance, like not to plug Canva, but businesses now like having to be all digital because of remote work, like Canva really empowers businesses and self-starters to create amazing and beautiful like content online that can really drive growth for your business. That's one example. Another one is like marketing. TikTok is something that students or like I guess young adults like us really can get around, just because it's so easy to create content that goes viral as well as to create things that are engaging. So I think just in terms of like access to technology that we have now, it's just we are like at a place where we're super lucky that we can like leverage these things. And I think this is a little bit out of scope for the question, but just in terms of navigating like the COVID world, I think we are again on this point quite lucky in the sense that remote work has now accelerated to a point that it didn't exist a year ago. Now it's become a lot more accessible, which means that, hey, if you're looking for internships, hey, if you want to speak to someone, you can literally message anyone in the world. Like the world is your oyster. I've had a chance to work in San Francisco, both remotely and in person. I don't think like pre-COVID, I would have even thought that that was something that was possible when I was at uni. So yeah, just think about it in the sense that like, hey, if you're, really interested in like crypto, Singapore is a really great place to do that. You can definitely get in touch with people and get remote work or like a remote internship experience working in any country, and it's very, very doable now. So yeah, I think just in terms of like the technology that we have access to, as well as the remote work environment today, you really, like all students, I feel like you should really be empowered to think global, and you definitely can do it.
Yeah, there are absolutely so many opportunities. I just know for myself, I started the pandemic not even having a TikTok account or really knowing what it was. And now 2 years later, that is my full-time job. Like I am a full-time content creator and I had no clue what any of it was about before this. So over to you, Adam.
Yeah, I was just going to tap onto what Audrey was saying. I think during the pandemic, it is just so imperative to tap into those online communities now, because the fundamental ways that we start companies and get jobs, those haven't changed, but the means of connecting have changed. And Audrey before I think it was Muskan, referenced Early Works, which is a great community of young innovators. And there's so many of these communities popping up. One of my friends, Max Marchione, has a community called Next Chapter, which is like 50 or so young people who talk about investing, their startup ideas. Lots of creators go in there and sort of showcase their products. There's just so many communities out there where you can tap into young, ambitious, and inspiring people. And I think that's been like one of the big shifts of the pandemic, and it really equalizes the opportunity. Like you don't have to be in a certain geographic location or know certain people. Just go into these communities, be open-minded, and sort of chat, and you can meet great people.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Over to you, Muskan.
I'll keep it really short, but basically Audrey and Adam said so many great things, which I'm also going to take into account for sure. But I think Audrey touched on this point of rise of tech. And I think also sometimes, getting into a community could be really scary. So I'd really recommend just reading. There's so many resources out there that people are posting. We've seen the surge of fintech. Examples: Afterpay, DeFi, EdTech, health tech, work from home solutions, QR codes, which all rose because of the pandemic. And if you just read up on it and just increase your knowledge of it, you'll find a gap in that market, or just like be interested in it. Like for me personally, I'm interested in what Mark Zuckerberg is trying to do with the metaverse, trying to create that. And that's what I've been trying to keep up to date with. So have a couple of things that you want to keep up to date with. And I think that also taps into what Adam was saying earlier with networking. You can bring those stories up and be like, hey, this is what I'm kind of looking into. Do you have any recommendations or anything I can, or have a conversation about it? Because you learn a lot more through that as well.
Absolutely. Oh, I've loved your responses to this question. Thank you so much. So the next question is the kind of final question that we have scripted. So people watching at home, students, this is your time to get that Q&A section buzzing. You've got a few more minutes before we kick off on all of that. So this question I'm going to open up to everyone. So whoever wants to jump into it first, feel free, go ahead. So by now, I'm sure that a lot of students are really interested in what sort of startups and innovation opportunities are open to them now. So I was just wondering what sort of projects and those further stepping stones that we were talking about before can students get involved with in Sydney now? Who's going first? Yes, Rishabh.
You SUSMI? No, I'm just kidding. There are some amazing societies that are out there, first of all, that are doing wonderful things. I will talk a little bit about SUSMI, but we have been holding hackathons and Meet the Startup events and all these amazing opportunities to get to know what exactly is going on right now. What can I get excited about? I think it's so important to remember what the other three have said. And that is that there are just so many amazing things that are happening outside of the terrible side of the pandemic. There are so many amazing things that are happening as well in terms of just new initiatives, in terms of people really coming together and connecting in a way that wasn't happening before. I think it's so important to look at the people who are around you. So look at the students, look at the academics, look at the staff, look at what they're doing, what are they getting involved in, what are they excited about, and what kind of opportunities are being presented to you. Facebook, LinkedIn, these are wonderful places to hear about new events, networking sessions, and things like that. There are startup accelerators, incubators, just such a great example. They have their proto workshops that they do open for anyone, free, proto X mentoring sessions, accelerators where over 3 months you can bring a startup to life. There are some really amazing opportunities out there. One thing I wanted to quickly touch on was actually the networking side as well. I definitely think that networking is very important because getting that community, getting that network is essential. But one thing I actually found that I didn't realize before was that these people are actually very, very willing to talk. I remember when I was kind of preparing for our SUSMI Metivate, our big hackathon, we're trying to get mentors and judges and that sort of thing. And I had contacted a certain person, and that person said, "Sorry, I'm not available, but I'll refer to you, my friend." And I'm like, "Cool, okay, let me go and contact them." I looked at their LinkedIn, and they were the CEO of a global organization. They had run multiple startups. They had done millions, billions of dollars in revenue. And I'm like, how am I supposed to be contacting this person? How do they have 5 minutes of their time to give me? I just said, you know what, screw it, I'm going to give it a go and see what happens. They got back to me. They said, let's jump into a Zoom call. That Zoom call went for about 40 minutes, and they ended up sponsoring our event. And I was like, that is incredible. That person was all about, I love what you're doing. This is exactly what we want to connect over. This is what we like to see. And let's work on events in the future as well. And I was surprised. Someone like me, I considered myself to be fairly ordinary. I don't know how I got to talk to that person, but I think that we forget that a lot of the fear is in our head, and there isn't really this element of us not being worth their time. I think definitely reach out and get those conversations started, because that's such a good way to open up new possibilities.
Absolutely fantastic. For myself, I know that my whole journey in my whole career actually started off when I went to my first year law camp. It can be transferred back into each step along that way just from that one camp. So definitely taking every opportunity, even if it might seem strange or small, go for it. Yes, Muskan.
Easy. No, camps are a really good way. I actually didn't attend any camps because I was too scared. I was like, oh my God, I have no friends. How am I going to make friends at camp? So that was my story with camps. But I think that's also a really good opportunity. But in terms of what I guess students can do at Sydney, I think obviously societies, which I think Rishabh's touched on, we have societies like SUSMI and Enactus, where at Enactus, you can essentially just create your own startup. This is a kind of a plug, your own startup risk-free, and literally come in, if you have a startup idea and we think it's great, you can bring it in, we'll provide you the funding, the financing, the mentorship, the resources, upskilling. And once you want to graduate and get out of Enactus, you can just take your startup, if it's grown, and leave with it. No questions asked. And I think that USE is also doing is the Entrepreneurship and Innovation major, which I think is massive. And I wish I had that back in my first year, because I would have done that possibly as a major. And you get to learn from the best people who are like pioneers in their innovation and entrepreneurship, and learn how to, get the skills and how to think like an entrepreneur or an innovator. But yeah, those are kind of two things I wanted to add. And I think Rishabh's basically touched on everything else. Adam and Audrey, if you have anything else, go for it.
Yes, Adam.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on some things like almost sort of outside of the university ecosystem as well. And I guess just to preface it, there's been this huge proliferation in the last year of startup funding and unicorns being built up. And I'm sure everyone's seen it sort of in the Sydney Morning Herald or the AFR. You see Canva, you see Afterpay getting acquired for $39 billion, all these other unicorns coming in. And when you get all this money and this excitement and people going into the ecosystem, people start to really give back and they start to try and reach out to the younger generations as well. And there's amazing organizations out there. So one of them is called StartMate, which has an accelerator and a fellowship program. So if you've got a company that you want to build, you can go in there, they can fund you and help you. But even if you just want to be exposed to the startup ecosystem, you can do projects where they introduce you to startups. You can do internships. They've got guest speakers. It's a wonderful program. But also the venture capital firms. So the firms which invest in startups do a lot of educational programs now. So some of the big ones are like Blackbird, Airtree, and SquarePeg. They do a lot of educational things where they interview other founders, they interview VCs, they're open to everyone. And now they've started getting sort of student-based and younger-based programs for people that want to start to make startups and people that want to invest. So there's just so much happening. And I'd really recommend people trying to put in as much research as possible because the opportunities now are just insane.
Absolutely. Honestly, I think I want to start a startup now. You guys have inspired me. Okay, so that kind of ends us in the formal question time. So now we are absolutely open up to the Q&A. So we only have one question at the moment, but I do have some backup questions just in case people are still thinking of theirs. So the first question, I might start off with directing it to Audrey, is Alex asks, what has been the favorite part of your journey so far?
Oh, that is a hard question to answer. I feel like every year, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like every year of uni or every 6 months of uni, I changed my mind about like what I wanted to do with myself. I think like first 6 months of first year, I was an auditor and I was like, yes, I definitely went to study accounting. Realized very quickly, not my style, did like a 180 and joined like the VC space. And for about a year, I thought like, oh, venture capital is the only thing that I want to do. And then again, realized like, hey, I don't understand any of this operational stuff. I'm talking to a lot of founders, but I never had to do this myself. So then I joined a startup, and I think, from there, I tried a little bit of everything and realized, okay, I really like the product design and the product space. And that's how I found myself like at Canva. So I think, I guess this is a kind of non-answer to the question, but it's basically saying that like, I think the most exciting part of the journey is kind of getting a better idea of like what you want to do throughout all of the different experiences you have. And you finally will come to a place. And even now I say this without a lot of confidence, because while I do love product and I do love product design, it's really hard for me to say like, hey, in 6 months, I am definitely going to be in X role. So yeah, I think for me, like the highlight has been, trying a lot of different things and being able to use all those skills to help me become like the best product manager that I could be today. And yeah, I would say like that's the most exciting part. And you'll be surprised where things can take you. I think in terms of just like a wilder experience, being able to like intern in San Francisco is definitely something that I think every student should try and get around if they have the opportunity to do. That's something that I did just because like I reached out to a lot of people, and someone took this poor intern in as a second year. So if I could do it, I'm sure that all of you guys can do it as well. And if you're really interested in tech, you're really interested in the startup space, being able to work in Silicon Valley is definitely something that I think everyone will really enjoy if they had the chance. So yeah, that would be like my favorite part.
Yes, Muskan?
I'd just like to say really quick, my favorite part was meeting my friends. Like through Enactus, I got to meet one of my closest friends that I will have probably touch wood for the rest of my life. And I talk to every single day. I don't think I can go throughout my day without talking to them. So I'm very lucky to have those people, and who also share very similar priorities and values in my life. So I say that would be my favorite moment / part.
Absolutely fantastic. Okay, so I There are some questions, but we might not have time for all of you to answer. So I'm just going to very quickly ask, if one person wants to answer it, what do you recommend for someone who has no experience and really no idea where to start? I know we have been speaking about it a little bit, but Muskan, do you want to, oh yeah, Rishabh?
I'm just going to really quickly jump in and say, I think that going in with a particular place that you want to start is probably one of the things you shouldn't do, because I think that closing yourself into a certain area, I should be starting there, I should be starting there, is exactly what is not conducive to serendipity, to the idea that some of the best things come up automatically without you realizing. For SUSMI, it was something that I was walking past in terms of an AGM going on. I'm like, what's this? I walked in and they were doing their AGM, and I put my hand up for a role. I didn't get the first one, I didn't get the second one, I got the third one. Here I am now. If I had said in the starting that I'm going to be aiming for this society, or I'm going to be aiming for that place, not quite work experience, but I think it's a similar sort of thing overall. I think you should keep yourself very open to different things, and I think you should just always push to look for what things can I expose myself to. That's probably one of the best things you can do.
Oh, thank you so much. All of you have had such fantastic answers to all of these questions. Really appreciate your time in this panel. And as you've said, you've mentioned so many fantastic societies and clubs and all those sorts of things. So all students who are watching and want to get involved, head on over to those, head to the socials. Okay, back to you, Imogen.
Thank you, Matilda. I also just want to point out and thank you for the beginning of the session, that fantastic, beautiful acknowledgement of country that you did at the beginning. So thank you, Matilda, Rishabh, Muskan, Adam, and Audrey for those insights that you've given us today. I know you've been plugging a lot during the session, but check out Matilda's TikToks, join SUSMI with Rishabh, join Enactus with Muskan, watch the Adam and Sachin show, and go join Audrey at Canva if you can. Go get a graduate job. So thank you all of you all today for joining us on this call. Next up, for the Innovation Festival, we have 2 workshops at 3:30 that you will not want to miss. We have our Disrupting with Purpose workshop, where you'll hear from Professor Stephen Maguire, Dr. Bernard Resk, and Dr. Paul Finn about the University of Sydney's brand new multidisciplinary major and minor in innovation and entrepreneurship. Come along to the session to find out about what this new major offers and how it will set you up for your future career. It is an interactive session as well, so it's not just going to be, you're not just going to be talked at, you're going to get to interact and have fun and join in some cool workshop activities. Also at 3:30, we have a workshop with business development lead at Zip and Sydney alumni Matthew Bright, who'll teach you how to utilize the skills you'll learn in your arts degree to help you get a job in the tech industry. All students are welcome to the session. However, it is specifically targeted towards students studying arts and social sciences. The Zoom links for these sessions will come up in the chat shortly, and we hope to see you there. Thank you.